Welcome to this week's episode of In the Club presents At the Club. If you like what you see on the channel and you haven't done so, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the page and ding that bell for notifications. At the Club is of course brought to you by Class for Kids.
Class for Kids is an industry-leading booking and management software designed for kids' activity clubs. We work with 250,000 monthly users around the world to help them save time on admin and organise their business. If you'd like to learn more, click on the link in the description below.
So on this week's episode, we have Aaron Bayne. Aaron is a video producer for Push Square who deals with all things PS5 on their YouTube channel. Aaron and I speak a little bit about his career progression, his journey so far, and why he wanted to get into video game journalism.
Yeah, so I work for a company called Hookshot Media, which runs a couple of gaming websites, those being Push Square, Pure Xbox, Nintendo Life, and Time Extension. I'm in the Push Square side of things, which focuses on PlayStation, and I run the YouTube side of things. So I'm posting the video versions of the reviews that come out, the top 10s, monthly roundups, let's plays, basically like a wide variety of stuff, but we're having a focus on PlayStation video games. And it's a role I've been in now for like 2 years. And it, I'm trying to think of like the origin of like how I eventually got into that. When I started getting into games journalism, I was originally like a writer. I'd done news writing, guides writing, op-eds and stuff like that. I actually started at a site called BBC The Social, which was Scottish content creators. I eventually ended up working for BBC The Social, doing like their video editing for their social content, whether that was like on Instagram or Facebook and stuff like that. And on the sidelines, I was running my own or like taking part in a YouTube channel, a gaming YouTube channel with a couple of guys, and that was just something we done in our spare time to really just amp up the portfolio. So it was like probably roughly about a year and a half of building up writing experience, video experience, podcast and stuff as well on the side. And then before eventually this role came up, and it was one of those things where when you read it, you're like, this seems perfect for me. And I was lucky enough to I went hard for like trying to get an application video ready, and then eventually actually got the job. It was always the job that I was like aiming to get, like this type of video producer role. And honestly, I didn't expect to get it as early as I did, but I think it was just through the idea of like I need these certain things in my portfolio to like get into this sort of role. Um, kind of focusing that over like a year and a half, eventually got into a role like this. So yeah, I was quite lucky. I feel like, well, I hate saying that I'm lucky actually because I did put a lot of work into getting it, but I do appreciate the position, like the role I'm in, because it's something that I love to do every day now.
You missed it one. There's like a glaring hole in your portfolio there, and that was you used to do a banging film podcast, I believe.
Yeah, I used to do a banging film podcast, right? So the kind of film aspect for all the loyal fans out there.
Yeah.
Actually, funnily enough, we've got a friend that still brings it up to me. Like says like sometimes if he's bored or something, like he'll just chuck on an old episode of the film aspect.
And love it. He'll love it. He'll revel in that. Those hot takes and those fantastic reviews, I would imagine.
The time that I nearly broke my soul by making myself watch 5 Scorsese films in a day. I don't actually think I'll ever watch movies again.
So that is actually that's a core part of your kind of journey towards where you get here today. Because you started off on a very similar path to me. It was a love for film, so you studied that at college and university. How do you think that was?
Yeah.
It always kind of like film and games simultaneously, or did one kind of take over the other? Like from
You
leaving
know,
school
no, for so
essentially?
long it was just films. Like games were all like I've always been a gamer, always been like a massive hobby of mine. But going into college and university, it was movies. Had little things where I was like, I want to do writing, I want to do like directing. Well, directing was never really something in my wheelhouse, to be honest. But I just kind of naturally fell into video editing across the course of college and university. So come the end of my degree, that was like the big focus was, right, I want to do video editing and I wasn't quite sure if it was like documentary, kind of newsy route, do I stick with like movies and stuff? And come the end of my degree, I knew that I wasn't in the position to get a job because I'd done that thing that so many folk from uni do, which is like they start the year, you're super enthused, and they say you're gonna need to do stuff on the side. You can't just be doing you need to do other stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm totally gonna do that. I'll 100% do that. And then because you get filled up with like exams or whatever. So come the end of the year, I was like, I do not have a job like right now. I'm not getting into anything right now. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's give myself an extra year. I'll apply for a master's degree. Uh, and I'd always kind of wanted to get into journalism originally, actually, but more looking at film journalism. So when I switched over to broadcast journalism with a focus on film, and that was my first few months was just like really focusing in on this. And they started asking us, "Do you want to do like a story? Like you can choose whatever story's going on right now." And I remember at the time it was Google Stadia was just getting like announced or coming out at the time, which was like a streaming console-less gaming experience, which was like one of those, "Will this work? Could this be the future?" I've obviously seen some stuff with streaming since then becoming kinda big, but that was, like, really interesting to me, so I made that, like, a big part of one of my, modules, and then I just kept, like every time we had, like, some new story, I was like, "Oh, well, there's this really cool thing going on in games. Oh, and there's this really cool thing going on in games," and I just kept, like, naturally going towards it. So then when I eventually I think it was like 4 months into the course, I just was like, "You know what? I think maybe this game stuff is more where I want to go." It's just something I've never really considered up until that point. Um, and when I realized that the emphasis on, like, getting a job in that department was portfolio, it wasn't degrees, and I already had a degree at this point. Um, so I just I left the course to focus on because I was like, "Oh, I could spend the next 9 months doing this and then start making a portfolio, or I could spend the next 9 months making a portfolio and hopefully being in a better position earlier." So that's what I've done, and I for the most I don't think I've ever felt the consequence of, like, not going for that journalism degree, at least not yet, you know? For the most part, no one's really, there's never really been much of a focus on anything I'd done in education. It was more, "What have you done now? What can you actually physically show us, and send us links to?" So, I mean, that's a really elongated tale of how I got into that, but yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't fully intentional to start, it just naturally kinda went that way for me.
So you're a testament to what we see quite a lot in the creative industries, or what I see quite a lot in the creative industries, and that's what you go into with an idea of what it is you're going to be can change, because sometimes your interests change, your passions change, or something that you was just kind of like bubbling under the surface comes to when you get to the sort of realization of the professional level, like, oh, I want to go and do this as a job, and then it kind of hits you in the face. No, actually, I don't. And we see, I think you see that
Mhm.
a lot in creative industries, and I think people think that that's not okay, but it's actually a lot more common than you would think. Just
Yeah, I mean, shifting, like, your career is something I wouldn't even say is, like, now that I'm in a position like this, that it's just, "This is me," you know? I've still considered, like, getting back into kind of film writing and stuff like that. Like, I'll always look as it as a like a an evolving sort of thing, and I'm kinda lucky in the sense that, like, my job in itself allows for that, you know, because, the guys at Hookshot are, like, great with me where they're very open to me taking the channel in directions that I feel are the best because ultimately, as a kind of PlayStation fan, I am the audience for so, like, what do I want to see in a channel like this? So I have the ability to maybe make something a little more, like, documentary-esque or stick to the kinda top 10s, or maybe I'm, like, more into my streaming at the moment or whatever. You know, so there's that sorta evolution built into the role itself, but I've always, like, been open to that continuing to evolve because, like, you know, people as well, I know that have, like, started out in games, they move into PR, maybe they're moving across to more television roles, like BBC related and the like. You know, it's always kinda shifting like that. I think that's kind of part of the charm of in like, the creative industries as a whole, because there's so many different areas, and you can get, like, real niche as well, like, maybe there's sects in, let's say, gaming itself where, like, people are focused on charts and sales and numbers, and then there's people who are focused on, like, the storytelling aspects, maybe the graphical, technical aspects of games and stuff. So there's, like, so many areas that you can, like, hone in on or expand out to or change across to that, like, isn't just games, that's just everywhere in the creative industry.
Do you think there's a correlation between, like, if you're a gamer across the board? Do you think that how much switchover is there between people who really enjoy board games and people who enjoy playing on consoles? Is that a kind of universal thing, or do those people split?
I think there's always gonna be some, like, crossover. I think, like, what I've found is a lot of people have their specific kinda, like I say, like, their niche within games, like, as gamers. You know, like, I like multiplayer shooters. I also like, single player games. I'm not, like, the biggest guy on JRPGs as an example, or, um, trying to think, like, there's some, like, strategy games, that maybe just aren't my wheelhouse. But, like, moving on to board games and stuff, I think there'll be people out there that could, like, if you like elements of this, you're gonna like elements of that. Like, Baldur's Gate 3 came out last year, was, like, a massive, massive game, and that's, like, a kinda D&D experience, so I think there was a bit of an uptick in, like, the people that were then interested in Dungeons& and Dragons. So, there is gonna be a crossover. I found that for the most part, people tend to stick into their lanes with, like, they like I mean, gaming's an expensive hobby, not everyone's gonna be dropping, like, 50 quid on a game that, well, I might like that, I've never really tried these games before, you know? So there's a lot of, like, financial risk involved there, but, yeah, I would say most of the time you kinda stick to where you're at, in my experience anyway.
Nice. So it's just to kind of go back on something you were talking about earlier on, and as you saying you're the audience, so you kind of have a rough idea of what video it is that you want to make. So how would you, if you were going to give somebody advice, and it kind of, you giving advice to PlayStation's kind of similar to somebody that's giving advice to make in engaging content for like a gymnastics class or like a dance school, because there is
Oh,
that
yeah.
niche, you're in that genre. So what do you look for as an audience member and also as a content creator when you're making stuff for the channel?
On a basic kinda principle, we're kinda lucky that game news cycles and, like, the big games and stuff, there's always a rotation, like, every month there's gonna be some big thing coming out that people want to know about, that people want to see, so we're kinda lucky in that sense that there's a built-in, like, constant line of ideas coming towards the channel, but ultimately, like, the way that I tend to think about it is, what are the questions that come to my mind in terms of, like, maybe the kinda mood of the industry, or what are the big things now? Like, last month, for example, or the other week, there was the announcement of, PlayStation's big first-party hero shooter, and a lot of people say, "Hero shooters are dead. We don't want these games, blah, blah, blah," and I made a video talking about, like, well, maybe they're not, because there's all these other games that are actually super popular, so while you might look online and see people being super negative towards it, there's clearly, like, a massive audience for it. So that was, like, just as an example of something that would be a question that I would think anyway as a fan, and that's what I'm always trying to do if it's coming to, like, original kinda discussion pieces, is what am I thinking? Like, is this something that's been on my mind as of late? But you do have to be selective, you can't just you have to consider whether there will be elements of material, I think, because you can't just throw any question out there,
Yeah.
because everything has its maybe the moment's past, you have to consider timing, you have to consider whether this has really been talked about elsewhere at a better degree than what you're gonna do, or can you elevate it and talk about it even more? So, with an example of that hero shooter thing, I just felt like it was something I was getting frustrated because I felt like there weren't many people, like, actually defending the point of, like, there is an audience for these games. So I think it's really been a bit, like, quite dynamic about how your particular industry is going, what are the current conversations, and how can you really discuss that in an interesting way, I think.
Nice. And just the last point on your sort of your style of creating videos, do you have a set style that you follow, or do you like take have any sort of like pick wee tropes from other videos? Do you have anybody that you look to kind of like take bits and pieces of visually, or do you have like a set in stone style of your own, or is it some one of those things that always kind of evolves and you just however you feel at the time, or however whatever you've been influenced by, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely something that evolves, I think. Like, I could watch a video in 1 month and be like, "Man, I'd love to make something more like that because I feel like that could bring this particular point across better than this way." Sometimes, I mean, a lot of like, the big conflict I go through quite often is the difference between, like, personality-based presenting on YouTube and, or personality-based content, and then more, like, service, like, informational. I tend to lean towards informational a little bit more than personality, um, because like, for especially with a channel like ours, where, like, a big focus of that would be, like, top 10s and reviews, people are there for the information, I feel anyway. They want to know, like, what this game's like and whether I should be buying it, what are the good points, the bad points. They also want to know, like, what are all the games that I should be playing this month? What are the best games that I should be playing this year? So there's always, like, a mixture of, like, this one needs to be played a little more straight and just be focusing on the information. This one here, because it's like a fun topic or a fun game, maybe would be leaning towards personality. It's something I'm constantly trying to find the balance of. I don't think I would even say that I've nailed it yet,
Yeah.
and it's been 2 years. I'm lucky that I've got 2 other, like, sister channels that I can look towards, for influence as well with Nintendo Life and your Xbox, because those guys over there, I mean, every one of us has our different kind of style, whether that be editing or presenting or writing, whatever. And I think there's, like, ways that we can pull from each other all the time, and, that goes to the entire, like, gaming YouTube community as well.
Yeah. So see you or your like the guys that you pull influence from, would you edit a video about a game um differently depending on the kind of style of the game?
Yeah, I think there would be aspects of that. I think sometimes I think I edit things around the idea of, like, how big are these, you know? So sometimes you'll get, like, a big PlayStation release, like, I remember God of War Ragnarok coming out in 2022, and that was, like, a big PlayStation release, and it felt like a big deal, and I tried to kind of bring that across in the edit where it's not just, like, the words and the gameplay, it's like you want to, like, feel something get kinda hyped up, and sometimes I think it just depends on, like, my hype levels as well. I always think, like, editing as an example is, like, a super personal thing in terms of, like, how are you feeling in the moment, That's why, like, creatively, sometimes you get days where you just go, "I can't I'm not feeling this," so, or maybe I'm super into this, I'm actually willing to spend, like, an extra 20 minutes on this little bit of an edit or whatever. So I do think it would maybe change depending on the type of game for sure, yeah, I
Nice.
think so.
Well, that's that. That's all I've got to ask you. Um,
That's it.
do you want to just drop where can people find you? Where can people get in touch with you if they have any hot takes on the back of this
Hot
episode?
take.
They want to argue with you online. Where
Yeah, I
can
mean,
they
you can
find
head
you?
over to the Push Square website, which is like our, this where I come from. I've also got obviously the Push Square YouTube channel is really where you'll see me cropping up, whether that's just in voice or video. But yeah, head over to Push Square, good site, and also check out the other sites from Hookshot. It's Good Xbox if you're into your Xbox stuff, and if you're into your Nintendo stuff, and Time Extension if you're into your retro gaming stuff as well.
Fantastic episode. Thanks very much to Aaron for giving us his time. If you like what you saw and you haven't done so, please do hit that like button on the video, subscribe to the page, and ding the bell for notifications, and I will see you in the next episode.